FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. This is Kerry Lutz, battling a cold myself, but we are real happy to have on Robert Spencer. He is director of JihadWatch, and you know him well. He is a New York Times bestseller, a couple of different books, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam and the Crusades, and The Truth About Muhammad. And hey, he's got a good article in Front Page Mag about jihad coming to America. And I don't know if you've caught this article about this Muslim who killed 4 young American men, one of them in New Jersey, in Livingston, New Jersey, which is right near where I grew up, and it kind of struck close to home. I mean, I know lots of young guys in Livingston, and it could have been any one of them that he chose to strike. And Robert, thanks for coming on.
Very happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And you know, it's amazing that I'm listening to the radio. I think it was last week, and I listened to this show from New York, the Todd show, and it is about the least political show that you're ever going to hear. And he says, I want to talk about something very serious. And next thing I know, he's talking about the story, and I'll kind of let you kind of talk about this now and tell us what happened.
Sure. Ali Muhammad Brown is a convert to Islam out of Seattle, and he is now the prime suspect in 4 homicides, the most notable one being this one that you mentioned in New Jersey. A young man, Brendan Tevlin, was sitting in his car, and Ali Muhammad Brown went up and shot him dead. He explained that he did it in revenge for the American actions in Muslim countries overseas. And so this is a clear jihad attack. He described it as a jihad. And of course, then the immediate reaction from the American media is to bury it. They call it a random shooting. They call it a serial killer because he's involved in these other killings. But they never get into the motive that he actually stated for what he did. Yeah,
and really, the story has gotten little airplay before Todd Pettengill, who is, he was on with Scott Shannon, legendary talk show guy. Now he's got his own show, and he's very popular in New York, and he just blew the whistle on this story. And initially, they said he was targeted, and it sounded like a drug deal gone bad. And the media was happy leaving it at that. And Todd said, wait, this guy wasn't targeted. He was only targeted in that he was an American kind of minding his own business. And the guy targeted him because he was guilty of being an American, and therefore guilty like the rest of us, like you and me, for the crimes of the American government in the Middle East, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They have this idea of collective responsibility that anybody who is an American is a legitimate target because we support the war machine, supposedly. And Todd is to be commended for drawing attention to this. It had fallen under the radar. I track these things all the time, and I had written about Ali Muhammad Brown, but of course he has a big platform and was able to bring some notice to it, so that it got picked up by Fox and some others. But still, there's no action. There's not the steps that we need to see taken in terms of calling upon Muslim communities in the United States to actively teach against this doctrine that issued vague condemnations of jihad terrorism and of the Islamic State and so on. But nothing of substance. They're not doing anything. They're not teaching their people why this understanding of Islam is wrong. And that just guarantees there are going to be more Ali Muhammad Browns.
Yeah, and honestly, is it going to matter? I mean, surveys said that roughly 30% of all Muslims are supporters of jihad. And so if 70% don't care or are indifferent or just going about their business, 30% of 1.2 billion, that's roughly how many Muslims there are in the world, that's 360 million supporters. And, you go back to the Crusades and you go back throughout history, and it doesn't really matter about the ones that don't support it here. They don't have any say, and they have no influence with their fellow Muslims. We got to address the ones who are in favor of it. How do you address them?
Well, I think that there needs to be action by both Muslims and non-Muslims to say we're going to enforce one law for all people here. We're not going to allow the preaching of sedition, what is actively sedition, in the United States. And so if you're preaching that Islamic law should supplant American law, or preaching aspects of Islamic law that are at variance with constitutional freedom, that ought to be a prosecutable offense. Right now it's going on. People like Ali Muhammad Brown are being told that the United States is the enemy and is doing terrible things, and they act upon it. And nobody is saying, wait a minute, where is this all being taught? We have to target that, and that's what needs to be done.
Yeah, and how many more of these guys are out there like him, waiting to do the same thing?
Yeah, there have already been quite a few. These stories don't get play. But there was also from Seattle, Musab Muhammad Masmari, last New Year's Eve. He went to a popular gay nightclub in Seattle. It was very crowded. He poured gasoline all over the stairway. And then he set fire to the stairway, intending to trap the people inside so as to kill as many as possible. The fire was put out, but it was made clear when he was arrested and put on trial. A friend came forward and said said that what homosexuals are doing is wrong and they should be exterminated. This was violent Sharia enforcement, violent enforcement of Islamic law in the United States.
And yet when certain states try to put ballot initiatives on there or try to make Sharia illegal, enforcement of Sharia, what happens?
Then they're charged with discrimination. Oklahoma, for example, 70% of Oklahomans voted in favor of an anti-Sharia law in 2010. And then a leftist judge overturned it, said it was interfering with religious freedom. The Hamas-linked Muslim Brotherhood Front Group, the Council on American Islamic Relations, started an all-out effort to get this law overturned. They have successfully done so elsewhere as well. And they claim that it's about individual observance of Islam, and it will interfere, anti-Sharia laws will interfere with weddings and funerals and things like that. This is absurd. Nobody's upset about Sharia because of weddings. People are upset about Sharia because it's violent and supremacist and denies basic rights to non-Muslims and women. That's why anybody cares about Sharia, and that's what the anti-Sharia laws are designed to target. The initiatives, however, continue largely to be blocked because of action by the Hamas-linked Council on American Islamic Relations.
Yeah, and let's just go over some of the punishments that are routinely meted out under Sharia law, Robert. Stoning for adultery, amputation of the hand for theft, the execution by whatever means for leaving Islam, in the beheading of unbelievers who are considered to be at war with Islam, also for spreading corruption in the land, which is a very vague thing, but that's what's the phrase that's used in the Quran. It's crucifixion or amputation of a hand and foot on either side. And so when you see the Islamic State crucifying people and people think, oh, this is this ancient savagery and barbarism coming back, it's actually right in the Quran. And people don't realize that what they're doing is completely in accord with Islamic norms. Yeah, and yet the political correctness, it's going to be the death of the West, isn't it? Indeed, no doubt about that. Yeah. So what are we going to do about this is really the question here. Well, I do think that we need to recognize on a societal level that Islam has this political, authoritarian, and supremacist aspect that is intrinsic to it. It's not just a religion in the sense of being something that claims to relate people to the divine. And so we have to recognize its political, authoritarian, and supremacist aspects, recognize how it's at variance with American law, with constitutional freedoms in numerous ways,
and take action to protect those freedoms.
Yeah, for sure. And we haven't been doing a very good job of it here in the West, have we? We've just totally failed to recognize the threat.
Indeed. And as long as we don't recognize the threat, it's a basic law of warfare that you can't defeat an enemy you don't understand. And yet the Obama administration in 2011 mandated the removal of all mention of Islam and jihad from counterterror training materials. They're just pretending that this problem doesn't exist. Well, that's not going to make it go away.
Yeah, and you go back to Fort Hood, that was about the first terrorist act during Obama's administration. That was a workplace, disruption, an act of workplace violence. And I want to talk about what's going on in the Middle East now, the failures of American policy overseas, and how that ties into what's happening here in the U.S. on the Financial Survival Network.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
People have been using gold and silver to protect their wealth for thousands of years. Shouldn't you? That's why I go to Cloud Hard Assets. Tom Cloud has been in the business for 38 years. Call him now at 800-247-2812. Tom's service is outstanding, and you can buy with complete confidence. Order today, and you'll have your metal in your hands in 10 days or less. Tom takes the guesswork out of what to buy, and you'll buy at the lowest possible prices. And as a special to FSN listeners, you'll get free shipping and insurance. So call Tom today at 800-247-2812. That's 800-247-2812, or find him on the web at cloudhardassets.com and tell him Kerry sent you.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
In case you just joined us, we're talking with Robert Spencer, author and expert on jihad, both here and abroad. And Robert, we've had these series of failures overseas. What's going on now with ISIS or ISIL, take your pick, or IS. The dissolution of the Iraqi state. We've got setbacks that have occurred in Afghanistan, and a whole host of failures, foreign policy failures in the Middle East. And, a lot of it stems from the failure, wouldn't you say, of the refusal of the U.S. and the West to just come out and admit that this is a war on fanatical Islam, right?
Absolutely, yes. The ridiculous aspect of all this was shown very clearly when Barack Obama stood up and said the Islamic State is not Islamic. If the Islamic State is not Islamic, then what is it? And how is it that it got to the strange situation where there are thousands of people misunderstanding Islam in the same way and making this same error? And how did they all learn this error, this false, erroneous version of Islam? It doesn't make any sense. And worse than that, it breeds complacency. It fosters complacency among Americans and hamstrings our ability to deal with this threat, because obviously we cannot deal with it properly if we can't even address what it is.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me back in the day in the U.S. when the FBI refused to acknowledge that there was a mafia, and therefore couldn't fight organized crime because J. Edgar Hoover, for whatever reason, some said he was compromised, but refused to acknowledge that there was this crime syndicate called the mafia. And as a result, no progress was made against fighting them until the day came when the FBI and the U.S. government said there is a mafia and we're going against them. And we're kind of in the same situation here, right?
Yeah, exactly. The denial is all-encompassing. It's mandated from the top, and it's self-defeating because it hamstrings the ability to deal with the problem. We are pretending that this is not something that is inspired by Islamic texts and teachings, and that just guarantees that we're going to be blindsided by attacks from quarters that we assume will not be the originators of attacks. And complacency and willful ignorance, there's just no good that can come from them.
Now, this group, ISIS here, they seem to be about the worst of the worst that anyone has ever seen. And finally, the U.S. is mobilizing against them. There's a whole block of countries mobilizing against them. Some are admitting that they're mobilizing. Others are just part of it and aren't really, out there publicly joining the battle. But again, it's the message here, the messaging from the administration is this isn't Islam. This is something else. It's not an Islamist group. And is that sending the right signal out?
It's completely false. It's completely fictional. This is a group that is consciously reviving the ancient model of Islamic governance that goes back to the time of Muhammad and the origins of Islam. And it is something that many Muslims believe that Islam is not really complete unless there is a caliphate in the world. And that's one of the reasons why the Islamic State is so attractive to young Muslims all over.
Yeah. And, it's, I mean, does Islam really, do the Muslims of the world really want to live under something like this? Is that what they really do?
Yeah, many do. I mean, look, we never saw this kind of appeal on the basis of let me say it this way. We never saw so many Muslims from the West going to join Al-Qaeda. We saw some going to join Al-Shabaab from Minneapolis, but they were Somalis who were interested in what was going on in their homeland. We saw a few people go to join Al-Qaeda, but nothing like the hundreds and hundreds, over 1,000 now, who have gone from Western countries to join the Islamic State. And it's clear that the Islamic State has this appeal for young Muslims that the others didn't have because it is a caliphate, because it is claiming to restore this multinational unity of all the Muslims worldwide.
Mm-hmm. And it's just, it's nuts. I mean, and in the end, look, in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood took over, and within a matter of days, or weeks, I should say, the citizenry of Egypt rose up against them. They pretty much said, we'd rather have the military running things than these guys because this is a giant step backward. Do you think that that's going to happen if ISIS starts running a country?
Yeah, certainly. It's the longer they're there, the more they will alienate the population. But they have the population in such terror that they might be able to sustain themselves for the long term based on that, like the reign of terror that started the Soviet Union and the reign of terror in communist China. It's something like that. And then the opposition is terrified and people are afraid. Maybe the Muslim Brotherhood would still be in power in Egypt had it been more brutal. I'm not saying that I approve of that or that it should have done that, but just that the Islamic State is so brutal, that might be its sustaining power.
Right. It just, it's kind of frightening, and you don't know, they'll really stop at nothing. They're so brutal. We've never experienced anything like this in our lifetimes, have we?
No. The caliphate was abolished in 1924, and long before it was abolished, it was a spent force. This is something that the world has not seen since the 17th century, really.
Yeah, this type of barbarism, I mean, yeah, it's, beheadings and torture and conversion by the sword. I mean, it's just, in its horror, it's just breathtaking in its horror and its barbarism. And it's really a giant step backward for humanity. And any civilized, sane person has got to be revolted by it. So.
Yeah, but if you grow up in an Islamic context where these things are taught as values, then you'll have a very different view.
Yeah, I guess so. But it's just really disconcerting that anybody in this day and age, in this world, modern world, could relate to this message, that it could resonate with them. And it should be a wake-up call for the progressives, the liberals, and the PC crowd that, whatever thoughts they had, the ability to reach out to any Islamist organization, whether it's Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranians, whomever it might be. And I'm grouping them together because they're just kind of opposite sides of the same coin. It's not realistic, is it?
No, absolutely not. And yeah, they all are essentially the same motives, the same goals, the same beliefs.
Yeah. And have to start looking for a new way of dealing with it. It's got to be defeated because, when you don't address it, it's gotten progressively more extreme. Going back to the Palestinians, they were allowed to fester, allowed to get stronger and stronger, even though they've never really gotten that strong, let's say. And now we have ISIS. That seems to be the natural outgrowth of not dealing with the real problem.
Well, no doubt they'll keep advancing until they're stopped. So we'll either stop them now or we'll have to stop them later.
Yeah. And stopping them has its price, and it will have its price, and the price keeps getting higher and higher, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And so Obama doesn't want to put ground troops there, and that's understandable, but I'm not sure there's any other way. And, of course, even if he does, he would probably hamstring them with rules of engagement that would make it impossible for them to do the job. And so perhaps it's for the best, but it's a very difficult situation because there's not going to be anything else that's going to stop them.
Yeah, and it almost looks like, Robert, that the decision's being taken away from him. All of his military leaders and even his Secretary of Defense are talking ground troops while he's saying no boots on the ground. And it's a Vietnam type of situation where more so-called advisors are being put on the ground at the same time he's saying boots on the ground.
Yes. Well, he's always had a taste for unreality. I mean, the whole idea of Islamic State not being Islamic is completely a fantasy, and so this is just more of it.
Yeah. So do you think the American public is waking up to what's really happening now?
Yeah, I think there's an increasing disconnect between the American people and the governing elite, and that ultimately they're going to have to become more realistic about this threat. It's the American people aren't going to tolerate this dishonesty at the top about it forever.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And on that note, Robert, tell us where we find you on the web, how we get your books.
I'm at jihadwatch.org. That's jihadwatch.org, which is updated many times daily with news and commentary about jihad activity in the United States and worldwide. And the books are at any self-respecting bookstore, as well as at Amazon.com and at my website, JihadWatch.
Excellent. And we've got links to your site up on the Financial Survival Network in the show notes to this interview. And make sure you sign up for our newsletter. Also, sign up for a free webinar taking place on September 24th on what's coming up next for the economy. September 24th, 9 p.m. Just click the link up on the upper left-hand corner of the site. Robert, thanks so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.